The moving truck pulled away just as the sun began setting over Riverside Meadows. Jessica stood in her new driveway, watching her 4-year-old daughter Lily chase butterflies across the freshly cut lawn. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe. The divorce had been exhausting. The legal battles, the late nights crying after Lily went to bed, the constant worry about money. But now, finally, they had a fresh start. This quiet neighborhood with its neat rows of houses and friendly-looking porches felt like exactly what they needed. A place where Lily could make friends, where Jessica could work from home in peace, and where they could both heal. "Mommy, look," Lily squealed, pointing at a bright yellow butterfly that had landed on the mailbox. Jessica smiled and pulled out her phone to snap a picture. These were the moments that mattered now. Just her and her daughter building a new life together. The next morning, Jessica was unpacking kitchen boxes when she heard a sharp knock on the door. Not a friendly neighbor knock. This was the kind of knock that meant business. She wiped her hands on her jeans and opened the door to find a man in his mid-50s standing there with a clipboard pressed against his chest like a shield. "Good morning," he said, though his tone suggested it wasn't good at all. "I'm Roger Patterson, president of the Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association. I need to discuss several violations I've observed at this property." Jessica blinked. "Violations? We just moved in yesterday." Roger didn't smile. He clicked his pen and pointed it at the welcome mat under Jessica's feet. "Your doormat is beige. According to Section 4.2 of the HOA Guidelines, all external floor coverings must be desert tan, not beige." Jessica looked down at the mat her mother had given her as a housewarming gift. It looked pretty tan to her. "I'm sorry, I didn't know there was a difference. I can get a new one." "See that you do." Roger made a note on his clipboard. Then he leaned to the side, peering past her into the house. "I also noticed you have several plant containers on your front porch. Container gardens require written approval submitted at least 30 days before installation." "They're just some herbs and flowers," Jessica said, trying to keep her voice calm. "I haven't even planted them yet." "Doesn't matter. The containers are visible from the street." "That's a violation." Another note on the clipboard. "I'll need you to remove them until you submit the proper paperwork and receive approval from the board." Jessica felt her stomach tighten. She'd dealt with enough difficult people during the divorce. Her ex-husband's lawyer had been a nightmare, constantly trying to intimidate her to make her feel small. She'd promised herself she wouldn't let anyone make her feel that way again. "I understand," she said quietly. "I'll take care of it." Roger handed her a thick packet of papers. "This is your HOA handbook. I suggest you read it thoroughly. We maintain very high standards in this community, and we expect all residents to comply fully." He paused, looking at her worn t-shirt and messy ponytail. "No exceptions." As he walked away, Jessica noticed him taking photos of her house with his phone. She closed the door and leaned against it, her hands shaking slightly. Lily appeared from the living room, her small face worried. "Who is that man, Mommy?" "Just a neighbor, sweetie. Nothing to worry about." Jessica forced a smile and hugged her daughter, but inside she felt the familiar weight of anxiety settling in. She'd moved here for peace, but it seemed like trouble had found her anyway. What Roger Patterson didn't know, what nobody in Riverside Meadows knew, was that Jessica hadn't always been this quiet woman in comfortable clothes trying to blend into the background. Before Lily was born, before the marriage and the divorce, Jessica had spent 15 years of her life in a different world entirely. She'd started karate at age 10, a shy kid looking for confidence. By 16, she was competing in regional tournaments. By 25, she'd earned her third-degree black belt in Shotokan karate and was sparring with people training for national competitions. She knew 50 different ways to defend herself, had reflexes most people couldn't even track with their eyes, and had the kind of core strength that could break boards and bricks. But that was before sleepless nights with a newborn, before her ex-husband had made her feel like she had to be small and quiet to keep the peace, before she'd learned that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. She hadn't competed in years. These days, her training happened after Lily fell asleep, practicing forms in the garage where nobody could see, keeping that part of herself private. She didn't want to intimidate anyone. She didn't want to fight. She just wanted a normal, peaceful life for her daughter. Over the next few days, Jessica tried her best to follow the rules. She bought a new doormat in what the hardware store assured her was desert tan. She moved her plant containers to the backyard. She parked her car carefully in the exact center of the driveway, but Roger kept coming back. Her garbage can was 6 inches too close to the street. Her daughter's pink bicycle was visible through the front window, which apparently violated some rule about children's toys. Each visit came with another violation notice, another threat of fines, another reminder that she was being watched. The other neighbors noticed. An elderly woman named Patricia who lived next door caught Jessica checking her mailbox one afternoon and whispered, "Don't let Roger get to you, dear. He does this to everyone new. Just keep your head down and he'll eventually find someone else to bother." But Jessica didn't want to just keep her head down. She'd done that before and it had cost her years of her life. She watched Roger walk away after his latest complaint, his clipboard tucked under his arm like a weapon, and something inside her shifted. She'd tried to be invisible. She'd tried to be compliant. Maybe it was time to try something else. But for now, she'd wait. She'd watch. She'd document everything just like her divorce lawyer had taught her. And she'd keep practicing her forms in the garage at night, just in case. A month passed and Roger's visits became part of Jessica's daily routine. Like clockwork, he'd appear with his clipboard, circling her property like a hawk looking for prey. Tuesday morning, he knocked on her door before she'd even finished her first cup of coffee. "Your car is parked 4.5 inches over the driveway line," he announced, holding up a measuring tape as proof. "That's a $50 fine." Jessica rubbed her tired eyes. Lily had been up half the night with a fever and she'd barely slept. "Roger, it's barely sunrise. Can we talk about this later?" "Violations don't wait for convenient times, Mrs. Martinez." He made another note on his ever-present clipboard. "I'll expect payment by Friday," she wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that 4.5 inches was ridiculous, that normal people don't measure driveways with tape measures. But she was exhausted, and arguing with Roger was like arguing with a brick wall that could fine you. "Fine," she said and closed the door. Through the window, she watched him take photos of her car from 3 different angles. The morning sun caught the gray in his hair, and for a moment she almost felt sorry for him. Patricia had mentioned that Roger's wife had left him a couple of years ago. Maybe this was how he dealt with loneliness, by controlling everything he could in this little neighborhood kingdom. But sympathy only went so far when you were the target. The situation got worse 2 weeks later. Jessica had started a small project with Lily to teach her about nature. They'd hung a simple bird feeder from the tree in their front yard, the kind you fill with seeds and watch cardinals and blue jays visit. Lily would press her nose against the window every morning, counting the birds and drawing pictures of them. Jessica was working at her laptop, designing a logo for a client, when she heard shouting outside. She looked up to see Roger in her yard, his phone held high, recording video of the bird feeder. She rushed outside. "Roger, what are you doing?" "Unauthorized wildlife feeding is strictly prohibited," he said, still recording. Section 7.4 of the HOA bylaws. This is a serious violation that attracts pests and creates unsanitary conditions. It's a bird feeder. For birds. How is that a pest? Roger stepped closer, invading her space. She could smell his cologne, something sharp and too strong. Single mothers who can't follow simple rules shouldn't live in quality communities like this one. Maybe you'd be more comfortable in a less structured neighborhood. Jessica felt her hands curl into fists at her sides. It was automatic. Muscle memory from years of training. Her body shifted slightly, weight distributing to the balls of her feet, shoulders squaring. For just a second, she imagined the technique she'd use. A simple arm redirect, maybe a wrist lock if he touched her. Nothing harmful, just enough to establish boundaries. But she caught herself. She took a deep breath, forcing her hands to relax. This wasn't the dojo. This wasn't a tournament. This was her front yard, and Lily was watching from the window. "Please leave my property," she said calmly, her voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside her. Roger smirked. He actually smirked like he'd won something. "I'll be watching you closely, Mrs. Martinez, very closely." As he walked away, Jessica noticed Patricia watching from her porch next door. The older woman shook her head sympathetically but didn't say anything. Nobody ever did. That evening, after Lily fell asleep, Jessica went to the garage. This was her time, her space. She'd set up a small area with mats where she practiced her forms. Kata. They called it in karate. Precise movements, each one flowing into the next, meditation in motion. She started with the basics, letting her body remember what her mind had tried to forget. Front stance, punch, block, turn. The movements were as familiar as breathing. She'd done them thousands of times, maybe tens of thousands, in competitions and demonstrations in the early morning classes before most people were awake. Her sensei had always told her that karate wasn't about fighting. It was about discipline, respect, and knowing yourself. The greatest victory, he used to say, is the fight you don't have to fight. She'd believed that once. She still wanted to believe it. But as she moved through more complex combinations, she couldn't help thinking about Roger, about the way he'd stepped into her space, trying to intimidate her, about the comment about single mothers, about how he treated her like she was nothing. Her strikes got sharper, faster, years of training compressed into movements most people couldn't even see properly. She wasn't some helpless victim. She'd earned her third-degree black belt by age 25. She'd sparred with Olympic hopefuls. She'd broken boards and bricks with her bare hands. Yet here she was, letting some bully with a clipboard make her feel small in her own home. The next morning, Jessica started documenting everything. She'd learned this from her divorce lawyer. Paper trails mattered. Evidence mattered. She created a spreadsheet with dates, times, and descriptions of every interaction with Roger. She took photos of her property showing compliance with rules. She even installed a simple doorbell camera, the kind that recorded video. She also started reading the HOA bylaws more carefully, not just skimming them, but actually studying them like she used to study kata sequences. And that's when she noticed something interesting. Several of Roger's violations weren't actually in the bylaws. He was making things up, or at least interpreting rules so strictly that nobody could possibly comply. Patricia caught her checking the mailbox one afternoon and walked over. "You're smart to document things," the older woman said quietly. Roger did the same thing to the Johnsons. They ended up moving out last year, said it wasn't worth the stress. "How many families has he pushed out?" Jessica asked. Patricia counted on her fingers. 3 that I know of for sure. Maybe more, and he sued the Hendersons over some fence dispute. Cost them thousands in legal fees before they finally gave in. Jessica felt something cold settle in her stomach. This wasn't just a difficult neighbor. This was systematic harassment. "Why doesn't anyone stand up to him?" she asked. Patricia looked sad. "Because he's got money for lawyers and most of us don't. Because it's easier to just follow his rules. Even the made-up ones, because," and she trailed off, then added quietly, "because we're scared." That night, Jessica practiced her forms again. But this time she wasn't just moving through familiar patterns. She was thinking, planning. Her sensei had taught her that true strength wasn't about muscles or techniques. It was about staying calm when everyone else panicked, about seeing clearly when others were blind with emotion. Roger thought she was weak because she was quiet. He thought she'd break because she was alone. He had no idea who he was dealing with, and Jessica was starting to realize that maybe it was time he found out. The flyer appeared in every mailbox on a Wednesday morning. Bright yellow paper, impossible to miss. Emergency HO meeting. Tonight, 7 p.m. Mandatory attendance. Jessica pulled hers from the mailbox and felt her stomach drop as she read the details. The meeting had one item on the agenda: addressing serious and ongoing violations at 847 Maple Drive. Her address. Her home. Roger was putting her on trial in front of the entire neighborhood. She called her mom to watch Lily that evening. No way was she bringing her daughter to this. Patricia caught her as she was leaving and squeezed her hand. "Stay strong, dear." Some of us know this isn't right. The community center was packed. All 43 homes in Riverside Meadows seemed to be represented. Jessica walked in and felt every eye turned toward her. She kept her head high and took a seat in the back row. Years of tournament experience had taught her not to show fear, even when her heart was racing. Roger stood at the front with a projector and laptop set up. He looked pleased with himself, like a prosecutor about to deliver a winning closing argument. He clicked a button and Jessica's house appeared on the screen behind him. "Thank you all for coming," Roger began. "We have a situation that threatens the very standards that make Riverside Meadows the premier community it is." For the next 20 minutes, Roger displayed photos of Jessica's house. Her car allegedly over the driveway line, the bird feeder, her daughter's bicycle visible through a window, the beige doormat. Some of the photos were clearly taken with a zoom lens from the street. Others looked like he'd been standing in her yard. These repeated violations show a blatant disregard for our community standards, Roger said, his voice rising. I propose a $5,000 fine and, if violations continue, legal action to enforce compliance. Jessica felt heat rising in her chest, but she stayed calm. She'd prepared for this. She stood up and the room went quiet. May I respond? She asked. Roger looked annoyed but nodded. Keep it brief. Jessica walked to the front, pulling out her phone. I've lived here for 2 months. In that time, I've documented every interaction with Mr. Patterson. She connected her phone to the projector, replacing his photos with her own evidence. This shows my car parked well within the driveway. These timestamps show the bird feeder was up for 3 days before removal. And this, she pulled up the HOA bylaws on screen, shows that toys visible through windows are not actually prohibited. Mr. Patterson has misrepresented the rules. She heard murmurs in the crowd. A few people were nodding. Roger's face turned red. This is ridiculous. You're twisting the facts. The real issue is that you're a disruptive presence in this community. You ignore warnings, you argue with authority. And frankly, I question whether someone in your situation is even fit to maintain property in a neighborhood like this. My situation, Jessica asked quietly. A single mother, working from home, clearly struggling to manage basic responsibilities. Roger stepped closer to her, his voice dropping to something cruelly intimate. Maybe you're just not cut out for this kind of community. Maybe you should find somewhere more appropriate for someone like you. The room was dead silent. Jessica felt her hands trembling, not from fear, but from the effort of holding back years of training that told her exactly how to respond to someone invading her space like this. She could see the technique in her mind clear as day. One step, redirect his energy, use his own momentum, but she didn't. She took a breath and said simply, I think we're done here. She gathered her things and left. Behind her, she heard uncomfortable murmurs. Patricia's voice saying, That was completely inappropriate, Roger. But nobody challenged him. Nobody ever did. The real breaking point came 3 days later. Jessica was teaching Lily to ride her bike without training wheels in their driveway. They'd been practicing for weeks, and Lily was finally getting confident. Her daughter's face was lit up with joy as she pedaled in wobbly circles, Jessica jogging beside her. Look, Mommy, I'm doing it. You're doing great, sweetie. Keep your balance. That's when Roger appeared. He marched up the driveway like he owned it, his face already set in anger. This needs to stop immediately, he demanded. Children riding bicycles in driveways creates a liability issue for the HOA. You need to take her to a park. Jessica stopped running and turned to face him, breathing hard. We're in our own driveway, Roger, on our own property. The driveway is considered a shared traffic area under HOA jurisdiction. This is a violation of safety protocols. Lily had stopped pedaling and was looking between her mother and Roger with worried eyes. Jessica felt protective instincts surge through her. Roger, we're not bothering anyone. Please leave us alone. I'm not asking, I'm telling you. Roger stepped forward and grabbed the handlebar of Lily's bicycle. This stops now. Everything happened fast after that. Jessica moved before she even thought about it, muscle memory taking over. She was between Roger and her daughter in a heartbeat, her hand on his wrist, removing it from the bike. Her voice came out cold and controlled. Do not touch my child or her belongings ever. Roger's eyes went wide, probably surprised by how fast she'd moved, but then his face twisted with anger. He'd been challenged and his ego couldn't handle it. In front of witnesses in broad daylight, Roger Patterson made the worst decision of his life. He shoved Jessica's shoulder with both hands. It wasn't a hard shove. It wouldn't have hurt most people. But Jessica wasn't most people. 15 years of training activated in an instant. Her body moved on pure instinct, redirecting the force of his push with a technique she'd practiced thousands of times. She didn't strike him. She didn't need to. She simply used his own energy against him, a smooth Aikido-style redirect that sent him stumbling backward. Roger fell onto the grass. He wasn't hurt, just shocked and embarrassed. For a moment, he just sat there staring up at her with wide eyes. Then he started screaming. You assaulted me. I'm calling the police. You're finished. I'll have you arrested. Jessica stood perfectly still, her posture completely different now. Balanced, centered. The quiet woman who'd been trying to avoid conflict was gone. replaced by someone Roger was just beginning to understand he should never have pushed. "Please do call the police," Jessica said calmly. "I'd be happy to show them the security footage of you grabbing my daughter's bicycle while she was on it, followed by you putting your hands on me first. What you just experienced was a defensive reaction that caused you zero injury." Roger scrambled to his feet, his face purple with rage and humiliation. "You think you're tough? You think you can intimidate me? I will destroy you in court. I have lawyers. I have money." "I don't think I'm tough, Roger." Jessica's voice was steady, almost gentle. "But I do know what I'm capable of. I'm a third-degree black belt in Shotokan karate. I've competed at national tournaments. I've trained with some of the best martial artists in the state. I chose not to respond to any of your previous harassment because I believe in using words, not force. Because I don't believe in intimidating people with physical skills." She paused, her eyes meeting his. "Unlike some people." By now, neighbors had come out of their houses. Patricia was recording on her phone. A younger couple from across the street, the Gonzalez family, had witnessed the whole thing. The husband stepped forward. "Roger, we all saw you push her first," he said firmly. "You grabbed that little girl's bike. This is on you." Roger looked around at the gathering crowd and seemed to realize he'd lost control of the situation. He pointed at Jessica with a shaking finger. "This isn't over," he hissed. "I'll have you evicted from this neighborhood." Jessica pulled out her own phone and opened a folder full of documents. "Before you try that, you should know I've documented 37 violations of HOA bylaws on your part, including financial discrepancies in the budget that I think the other residents would be very interested to see, and 14 separate instances of harassment that constitute a hostile housing environment under fair housing law." She looked at him steadily. "So please, Roger, try to evict me. I'm ready." For the first time since she'd moved in, Roger Patterson had nothing to say. The police arrived 15 minutes later. 2 officers, one older with gray at his temples, one younger and looking like this was just another routine call. Roger met them at the curb, talking fast and pointing at Jessica like she was some kind of criminal. "That woman attacked me. Assault and battery. I want her arrested immediately." The older officer held up his hand. "Sir, slow down. Let's start from the beginning. What happened here?" Jessica stayed calm on her porch with Lily beside her, one arm around her daughter's shoulders. Patricia stood with them, and several other neighbors had gathered, including the Gonzalez family. Everyone looked tense, but Jessica felt strangely peaceful. She'd spent 2 months being afraid, being intimidated, being small. That was over now. The younger officer approached her. "Ma'am, can you tell me what happened?" "I have security camera footage," Jessica said simply. "Would you like to see it?" That got both officers' attention. Jessica pulled up the video on her phone and they watched it together. The footage was clear. Roger walking up the driveway, Lily riding her bike, Roger grabbing the handlebar, Jessica moving between them, Roger's two-handed shove to her shoulder, Jessica's smooth defensive movement that redirected his energy and sent him falling backward onto the grass. The older officer replayed it twice. Then he looked at Roger, who'd followed them over and was watching the screen with growing horror. "Mr. Patterson," the officer said slowly, "this video shows you initiating physical contact. You grabbed the child's bicycle and then you pushed this woman. She made me fall. She used some kind of martial arts on me." "She defended herself," the officer corrected. "And from what I can see, she used minimal force." "You're not injured, are you?" Roger sputtered. "That's not the point. Actually, sir, that is exactly the point." The older officer's voice had gone from polite to firm. "You put your hands on her first. What happened after that was a defensive reaction. We're not filing charges against her. However, I strongly suggest you maintain distance from this family going forward." The younger officer was taking notes. "Ma'am, has Mr. Patterson been harassing you?" Jessica took a breath. Here was the moment. She could let it go, could just be grateful the police weren't arresting her, could go back inside and hope Roger left her alone from now on. That's what the old Jessica would have done. The Jessica who made herself small to keep the peace, but that Jessica was gone. "Yes, officer. For 2 months now. I've documented everything." She pulled up her spreadsheet, her photos, her timeline of events. The officers looked through it all, their expressions growing more serious with each swipe. "This is extensive documentation," the older officer said. "Have you considered filing a restraining order?" "I'm considering it now," Jessica replied, meeting Roger's eyes. He looked away first. The officers issued Roger a formal warning about harassment and told him to stay away from Jessica's property. They advised Jessica on how to file for a restraining order and took copies of her documentation. As they left, the older officer said quietly, "You've got a strong case if you need to take legal action. That's some impressive record-keeping." After the police left, the neighborhood seemed to explode into action. Patricia immediately called for an emergency HOA board meeting, not to discuss violations, but to discuss Roger himself. The Gonzalez family started texting other neighbors. Word spread fast. That evening, Jessica's doorbell rang. She opened it to find Patricia, the Gonzalez family, and 4 other neighbors she barely knew standing on her porch. "We need to talk," Patricia said. "May we come in?" They crowded into Jessica's living room. Lily was at her grandmother's house for the night, so they could speak freely. Mr. Gonzalez spoke first. "We owe you an apology, all of us. We've watched Roger bully you for months and we didn't do anything. We were cowards. He did the same thing to us when we first moved in," Mrs. Gonzalez added. "Made up violations, threatened fines. We gave in. We followed his rules because it was easier than fighting." Patricia pulled out a folder. "After you mentioned financial discrepancies at the HOA meeting, I started digging. I'm on the board, but Roger always handled the money himself. Look at this." She spread out bank statements and receipts on Jessica's coffee table. "The HOA dues are supposed to go toward maintenance, landscaping, and community improvements. But look at these expenses. Roger's been charging the HOA for personal purchases, his car repairs, his home security system, even groceries listed as board meeting supplies." Jessica leaned forward, studying the papers. Her graphic design work had taught her to spot details, and these details were damning. "How much are we talking about?" "Over 2 years? At least $15,000. Maybe more." The room went quiet. Then one of the other neighbors, a man named Tom, spoke up. "I've been wanting to say something for years. Roger threatened to sue me over my fence height. It was completely within code, but he said he'd take me to court anyway. Make it cost me thousands in legal fees even if I won. So I took the fence down." He looked at Jessica. "When I saw you stand up to him today, I realized how pathetic I've been." Others started sharing their stories. Roger had threatened everyone at some point. He'd made life miserable for anyone who questioned him. He'd created an atmosphere of fear in what should have been a friendly neighborhood. "We're calling for a vote to remove him as HOA president," Patricia said firmly. "With this financial evidence and Jessica's harassment documentation, we have grounds. But we need people to actually show up and vote. We need people to be brave." "I'll vote," Tom said immediately. "So will we," the Gonzalez family said together. One by one, everyone in the room committed. Then they started texting other neighbors, making calls. By the end of the night, they had commitments from over 30 households. More than enough to remove Roger from power. 3 days later, the official HOA vote took place. Jessica walked into the community center to find it packed again, but this time the energy was completely different. People smiled at her. Someone had saved her a seat near the front. Patricia stood at the podium, not Roger. "We're here to vote on removing Roger Patterson as HOA president effective immediately," Patricia announced. "The reasons include financial mismanagement, harassment of residents, and abuse of authority. All those in favor?" Hands shot up around the room. Jessica counted quickly. At least 35 votes, maybe more. Those opposed? 3 hands. Roger sat in the back corner, his face pale. He'd brought his lawyer, probably hoping to intimidate people. But the fear he'd created for so long had finally broken. "The motion passes," Patricia said. "Roger Patterson is removed as HOA president. We'll be conducting a full audit of the finances and pursuing appropriate legal action for any misappropriated funds." Roger stood up, his chair scraping loudly. "You'll regret this. All of you. I'll sue the entire HOA for defamation." His lawyer put a hand on his arm and whispered something. Roger's face went from red to white. He grabbed his briefcase and walked out without another word. The room erupted in applause. People were hugging, laughing, some even crying with relief. Patricia came over. "You did this," the older woman said. "You stood up when none of us would." Jessica shook her head. "We all did this. I just went first." That night, after Lily was asleep, Jessica went to the garage. She moved through her kata form slowly, precisely, letting the familiar movement center her thoughts. Her sensei had been right all along. The greatest victory was the fight you avoided. But sometimes, avoiding a fight wasn't the same as backing down. Sometimes standing your ground was exactly what prevented the real fight from happening. She'd moved to Riverside Meadows looking for peace. She'd found conflict instead. But in facing that conflict, in refusing to be made small, she'd found something better than peace. She'd found her strength again. And she'd helped a whole neighborhood find theirs too. The restraining order came through a week later. Roger Patterson was required to stay at least 50 feet away from Jessica and Lily at all times. His lawyer had advised him not to contest it, especially with the security footage and witness statements stacked against him. Jessica didn't feel victorious exactly. Mostly she felt relieved. She could finally walk to her mailbox without looking over her shoulder. Lily could ride her bike in the driveway without fear. They could just live their lives like normal people. But Roger wasn't done yet. Despite his lawyer's advice, he tried to fight back through the legal system. He filed a countersuit claiming Jessica had assaulted him and created a hostile environment. It was a desperate move, and his lawyer knew it. Jessica's attorney was a sharp woman named Diana Chen who'd handled her divorce. When Diana saw the evidence, the documentation, and the security footage, she actually laughed. "This is the easiest case I've had in years. His own actions are on video. Plus, with the HOA's financial audit showing embezzlement, his credibility is already destroyed." The audit results had been damning. Roger had stolen over $18,000 from the HOA over 2 years. He'd been clever about it, spreading small charges across dozens of receipts, but Patricia and the new board had found everything. The HOA filed criminal charges, and suddenly, Roger had much bigger problems than his feud with Jessica. Faced with both criminal charges and a civil suit he couldn't win, Roger's lawyer negotiated a settlement. Roger would drop all claims against Jessica, pay back the stolen money, and agree to move out of Riverside Meadows within 90 days. In exchange, the HOA agreed not to push for jail time. Jessica accepted the terms. She didn't want Roger in prison. She just wanted him gone. 3 months after that day in the driveway, Roger's house went up for sale. Jessica was watering her garden when she saw the moving truck pull up. She watched from behind her tomato plants as Roger loaded boxes, his movements slow and defeated. Their eyes met once across the street. Roger looked away first and climbed into his car without looking back. Patricia came over that evening with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. They sat on Jessica's porch while Lily played with chalk on the sidewalk. "He's really gone," Patricia said, sounding almost disbelieving. "After 7 years of tyranny, he's actually gone." "How does the neighborhood feel?" Jessica asked. "Different. Better. People are talking to each other again. Did you see the Martinez family put up those flower boxes? The ones Roger would have fined them for?" Patricia smiled. "They're beautiful." And Tom rebuilt his fence to the proper height. The whole street feels lighter somehow. The changes went beyond just property improvements. Mr. Gonzalez had been elected the new HOA president, and his first act was to rewrite the bylaws. The new rules were reasonable, focused on actual safety and property maintenance rather than arbitrary control. No more measuring doormats or counting inches on driveways. But the biggest change was in how neighbors treated each other. People who'd been too afraid to even make eye contact before were now having block parties. Kids played together in yards. Adults chatted over fences. The community that Roger had ruled through fear became an actual community. One Saturday afternoon, Patricia approached Jessica with an idea. "Some of us were talking. What you did standing up to Roger, it made us realize how powerless we'd all felt. Not just with him, but in general. And we were wondering," she hesitated, "would you be willing to teach a self-defense class?" Jessica was surprised. "I don't know. I mean, I haven't taught in years." "You don't have to teach us to be black belts," Patricia said quickly. "Just some basics. How to stand confidently, how to set boundaries, how to defend ourselves if we need to. Especially for the women in the neighborhood who felt small." Jessica thought about it. She'd kept her training private for so long, treating it like a secret part of herself that didn't fit with being a mother, with being normal. But maybe that was wrong. Maybe her strength wasn't something to hide. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." The first class had 8 women. The second had 15. By the 4th week, they'd moved from Patricia's garage to the community center, and even some men had joined. Jessica taught them basic stances, simple blocks. how to use an attacker's momentum against them. But more than the physical techniques, she taught them confidence. Self-defense isn't about being able to win a fight, she told her students. It's about carrying yourself in a way that tells people you're not an easy target. It's about trusting your instincts. It's about knowing you have the right to take up space in the world. She saw women transform over the weeks. Shoulders came back. Voices got stronger. Mrs. Kim, who'd barely spoken above a whisper, started saying no to things she didn't want to do. Young Brittany from the corner house walked taller, made eye contact with people. Lily loved watching her mom teach. She'd sit on the sidelines with a coloring book, but really she was watching every move. One evening she asked, "Mommy, can I learn karate too?" Jessica knelt down to her daughter's level. "Do you want to?" "I want to be strong like you." Jessica hugged her tight. "You're already strong, sweetie. But yes, I can teach you, when you're ready." A year after Roger left, Riverside Meadows was almost unrecognizable. The community center hosted regular events. The HOA budget was transparent and properly managed. People looked out for each other instead of looking for violations. Jessica's graphic design business was thriving. She'd made friends, real friends, with Patricia and the Gonzalez family. Lily had started kindergarten and came home every day talking about her new best friend who lived 3 houses down. One warm evening, they held a neighborhood barbecue in Jessica's driveway. The same driveway where everything had changed that day with the bicycle. Tom brought his famous ribs. The Martinez family made homemade salsa. Kids ran around playing tag while adults laughed and talked. Patricia raised her glass. A toast to Jessica, who reminded us all that standing up for yourself isn't just brave, it's necessary. Everyone raised their glasses, and Jessica felt her eyes get wet. "I didn't do anything special. I just refused to be afraid anymore." "That's exactly what made it special," Mr. Gonzalez said. "You showed us we didn't have to live that way." Later that night, after the guests had gone and Lily was asleep, Jessica stood in her driveway under the stars. The bird feeder hung in the tree, and she could hear crickets chirping in the garden she'd finally planted without anyone's permission. She'd moved here looking for peace and found a war instead. But sometimes you had to fight for peace. Sometimes you had to stand your ground before you could find solid footing. Sometimes the strongest thing you could do was refuse to be small. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mom. "So proud of you, sweetheart. You've built a good life there." Jessica smiled and typed back, "Yeah, Mom, I really have." She looked up at her house, her home, with its non-compliant welcome mat and her daughter's bike lying in the grass and her garden growing wild and free. It was perfect, not because it followed someone else's rules, but because it was authentically, messily, beautifully hers. And that was worth fighting for.